Nikola. I'm a software engineer, as was just mentioned there, and I'm the technical lead of the OpenJaw digital experience team, and Macdara is our product owner, product manager of the OpenJaw digital experience team also. So I'll let you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about background to OpenJaw and digital experience. So we set up this unit 2 years ago in OpenJaw. So OpenJaw is basically an Irish founded company. We have 350 employees and we have 6 offices around the world. Our main platform was typically a back-end as a service platform, but 2 years ago the company decided to introduce digital experience, so we set up this team. And I was going to say we've 30 customers around the world, and mostly airlines, airline companies and loyalty companies in the travel industry. So it's an e-commerce platform for travel companies. So we're enterprise software. We sell our technology to travel companies, and then they use it to sell their products to consumers. So it's B2B2C.
Yep. So what we're kind of here to talk to you about today is UX and engineering, the structure of our teams and our organization, our journey, how we got to that organization, and discuss some of the things we've learned over the last 2 years while trying to figure out the system that works best for us. And then at the end we can have some discussion time. So this image is kind of a running joke in our team. Often you get designers kind of feeling like the engineering team views them as just artists painting pretty pictures, handing them over and expecting them to be created into these fully fledged applications. But as a UI engineer, you kind of get the same feeling from back-end engineers. Sometimes they see you like you're just slapping CSS on HTML and making things look pretty. But it's a more complicated process than that. So UI engineers and UX designers often have a natural affinity in that way, I think. So Macdara is going to talk about the structure of digital experience at OpenJaw and how we are set up.
Great, thanks, Nicola. Yeah, so I just think it's relevant just to understand how we structured our team. So we actually don't have UX design in-house in OpenJaw at this point in time. But as Nicola said, we have a team who are familiar with, and engineers and so on who are sensitive to design, but we actually have a partner in Dublin who's frontend.com, and we've been working very closely with the team here, Frank Gain and Mancy and Clayton. So they kind of are extended team for us, and they provide interaction design, UX research, and some UI development consultancy and accessibility, because they work with a lot of different customers, different projects. So we've been working on a kind of a lean UX model, so it's a bit interesting, it's a bit different. I suppose being a smaller type company, we weren't able to hire a full UX team from the ground up and just start off like with 5 or 10 UX people, and I just felt it wouldn't be good to bring 1 or 2 UX designers into a company where they were so heavily outnumbered by, say, we're a very engineering heavy organization. So what we did was we partnered up with Frontend, and it's been really good, and now we have 1 UX designer in our team in-house, and we're starting to build up our in-house capability. So I suppose that's the backdrop to this story. And then just about our own team. So this is our crazy bunch. We're very good at doing the DX symbols. So we're practicing that a lot. And we have 8 React engineers, a QA, product owner, and obviously tech lead as well, and our 3 extended family UX designers. So what we've been working on together with our I suppose, in-sourced designers from Frontend.com and also from our own in-house team to build this responsive web app that sits on top of what's called the T-Retail platform, which means travel retail, and that's an e-commerce platform, as I talked about. So it's a responsive application, it's a single source code, and as Patrick just talked about, it has to do all those things that, accessibility, and we then offer that as a product to our customers who can rebrand it. So we have the additional challenge of rebranding. Like, we have our own design system, but then every customer we work for has their design system. So it's really complex to try and deliver a product that can be themed for every big airline, loyalty company around the world, and also still remain responsive and accessible, compliant. So Nicola is going to talk now about our journey and how this experience has gone for us.
Yeah, so when we started out 2 years ago, we were a very small team. I think it was just myself and Macdara in the beginning. We got more and more people as we went along, but in many applications I'd worked on previously, the UX and the engineering processes are often considered completely separate processes with their own separate results. So if you think about it, even if your design team and your engineering team are both using an agile methodology, the outcome is still kind of waterfall, because your design team have to produce designs which are then passed on to the engineering team, which have to produce a working application at the end. So designs are usually finalized or brought to a high fidelity standard before they're passed on to the engineering team. And as Macdara was saying, we're building an e-commerce platform that allows you to rebrand, reskin, to suit your brand, but it's also built on top of a lot of hotel suppliers, car suppliers, things that have been quite old and are very resistant to change. We also have to take into account the fact that we are building one application to fit many different screen sizes. We're not building an independent screen size for each possible thing, so we had a lot of considerations to make there. So what we found when we received, on the engineering team, when we received high fidelity prototypes, we were running into all sorts of information problems, like the hotel details page had a lovely list of all the features with your hotel, Wi-Fi, free breakfast, all that kind of stuff. But the information we were getting back from our supplier had that with each room, so we couldn't highlight that up the top of the page. So we had to find a way to work around it and kick the designs back to the designers to work out a solution to this. So we've got this big blank space at the top of the page, and then we've jacked in a load of extra information into each result, and it just didn't look pretty. So another problem is that we're getting in designs that work perfectly on mobile, but then had a completely different HTML structure when you look at the desktop designs. And because we're building one application, that's a huge problem for us. We had to go maybe the mobile version first, which didn't look as great as it could on the desktop version. So there was a lot of back and forth and kicking back to the very start of the process again. So this is kind of the process we worked on and started to work with us. So because we were such a small engineering team at the beginning, we were able to sit in on the actual design sessions, and we sat in on the low fidelity wireframes, the top left here. We sat in at that point, and we were able to decide, based on the structure of these wireframes, is it responsive? Is it going to work from mobile to desktop, tablet, all the iterations in between that? Do we have that information in this place at this time on this page that we are looking at right now? And this meant that we were catching all these issues really early on in the flow. We were able to resolve them with the designers then and there before moving on to high fidelity, which is a longer process when they're made look a lot nicer and more complete. So we would work on the low fidelity wireframes together. The development team would go off and create a first prototype, get the functionality working, make sure the suppliers were all working, put it in front of Macdara, make sure it met his criteria. The designers would then be producing the high fidelity designs, which we would apply on top and release a finalized feature, and that worked pretty well for us. We also had a greater understanding of the overall user experience that front end we're trying to provide for our application. So we had a lot less confusion. We weren't just receiving designs and trying to understand the flow that they were going for. We'd been in the room, we had asked all the questions we needed to ask, and we understood what we were trying to deliver.
I might just add to that as well, Nicola, the iterations was what really kind of saved us as well, that we worked more through iterations. So to be able to accept like a low fidelity implementation of a feature very early, and the team were given a lot of freedom to make decisions. And then that would inform our designers to be more aware of the different states and scenarios that can arise. So instead of designing for a perfect situation, they could design for a more realistic one. So we ended up then take 3 or 4 iterations to actually get it right. So it was a bit more patience, but it also meant the development team had a lot more
insight.
Yeah, a lot more freedom and insight to get it right. Instead of trying to get it perfect on the first go, like incrementally, we would actually have a second chance, a third chance to get it right.
Yeah. And one thing I was hugely worried about going into this process is when you get designers and developers in a room together, it can kind of turn into a battle of opinions, or a lack of understanding can come across as criticisms when that's not truly the problem. We went in with the mindset that front end are the design experts, we are the technology advocates. We're both trying to produce the same goal and the same result. So UX and engineering are not two separate processes. They are two areas of expertise within the same process trying to produce the same goal, which is a great application. And the results that we saw from this, obviously, way less blockers. We caught them earlier.
Yeah, so we kind of brought this in after about 6 to 9 months in. We were having a lot of issues and we were struggling a bit. So I think we came up with a new, it's probably a standard thing a lot of you do, but we had come from a kind of sales and marketing place. So we had created a lot of designs up front to kind of get a business case through. And there was a kind of inheritance of these designs. So that's how this whole situation arose for us, with these kind of handoffs of existing designs to engineers to implement. So it was kind of by accident we got there, but we're going to have to go back and just start again. And we have a good process now. We
user tested our own process on ourselves, basically. So we were releasing features a lot quicker as well. And then the last one was kind of a surprise effect. Previously, you'd see engineers, I'm one of them, I definitely got frustrated with the complex designs we were getting in that just didn't fit what we were trying to build, or the information wasn't present. But the designers were also becoming frustrated because some of us were flat out arguing whether things should be done at all as well, because we had the lack of understanding. But having that time to talk through everything at the very beginning made it a lot easier for us to reach that understanding. We were both fighting for the same goal, which is a great user experience. So we had a bit more ownership over the designs. We had a better eye for detail when it came to applying the finalized high fidelity prototypes, for example. I think it benefited us all in a way. And now I guess that sounds all rosy and great in theory, but how do you actually put that into practice, and what kind of problems do you come across and how do you fix them? So I'm just going to talk you through some problems that we hit and how we overcame them, really. As Patrick was just saying, use the design system. It's a really, really useful tool, and a UI framework is an even better tool. So there's a lot of words for design system used. I like Airbnb's term for it the most. They call it a design language system. So it's not so much, it's a lot easier to make progress quickly if you're both speaking the same language to each other when you're in the room. For example, if I have, this is a really simple example, but if I have button large in my design system and I have button large in my code base, myself and a designer can get in a room and talk about how we're going to improve that. We both know exactly what we need to change. He needs to go change the symbol in the sketch file. I need to go change that React component in the code base. We're both just, it's a lot clearer to both of us what we're changing and what we're talking about, and where else in the application it's reused, which is a big problem. And from that, again, we were still working this process out. We realized we kind of had a visual toolkit there for us to pick and choose from. So we had already developed the hotel booking flow, and we're looking at the flight and the car and the rest of the products that we need to offer through this e-commerce platform. And we realized we don't need fully completed designs to start working on flights. For example, you have a date picker here. Why does it need to be different for flights? If it works for hotels, it should work for flights. You don't want to create two different solutions for that either, because your user will be confused if you have two completely different methods of interacting with a date field. So we started to pull together all of the common components and work ahead, get prototypes out while we were looking at the low fidelity prototypes. It saved us so much time that it took us about half the time to develop the car booking flow as it had the hotel one originally.
One of the really interesting things from working in a framework like React, where you're trying to reuse components as much as you can, and you're trying to educate your designers that we already have a calendar picker, like you said. Does it really need to be different from one product to another? So rather than the kind of enforcing a straitjacket, what we kind of do is, well, if you want to make it different, give us a good case, give us some research, give us some data to say this is why it needs to be different. So kind of there's a constant over and back between consistency versus good design. As Patrick said, you don't want to confuse the two, because sometimes it's like if you force in the wrong component into the wrong flow, it's just convenience for the development team, but it's actually a Frankenstein with a weird looking input or whatever. So we kind of have to balance that. That's a constant conversation we now have, is consistency versus kind of bespoke, tailored for that particular page or flow.
And as developers, you don't want to be afraid of making changes to things. So it was helpful to be able to take these pieces and understand if you're changing it here, it's also changing on hotel, which we've already completed and signed off on. Like, we understood that these changes would be evolving. These components evolve, and that's natural, and it's okay for us to do that. So the next thing is front-loading the UX designs. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but if we let the designs go to high fidelity, we'd already wasted too much time. We needed to get discussing them while they were low fidelity. We needed to do multiple iterations while it was just basic sets, boxes of information on the page, so we got them in the right structure. The information is confirmed there at the right time. So we'd go through maybe 10 iterations, I think.
Yeah, so we'd have blocking diagrams, mental models, user flows, different scenarios mapped out on really, really simple black and white wireframes, and then like Nicola said, it could go 10, 15, 20 iterations over a very short period before we go near like Envision and Sketch and high fidelity stuff.
Yeah.
So it's all very cheap and rapid, kind of lean UX, and we found that was really good because it just became too much of an overhead constantly trying to improve the high fidelity designs too early on, and it was really slowing down our team.
Yeah, and by the time it got to high fidelity, then you had buy-in from the whole engineering team, product owner, everybody involved in the process. We all were agreed on what we were doing. So the next thing is kind of front-loading your engineering. So most of what I'm talking about here is doing so much prep work that you're almost sick of it by the time it comes to actually doing the work itself. So after a lot of trial and error, we found our team sweet spot is 3-week sprints with all these stages of refinement. So the first one is story readiness, where the product owner or engineers in the team come to a meeting, and if it's a product owner, you're suggesting user stories and you're explaining the acceptance criteria, and the team are accepting them into the dev grooming the rest of the process. If you're an engineer, you're showing up and you're going, this is tech debt that is extremely important and we need to get this in now, and you're explaining how it's going to be done, how long it's going to take. So we have a really nice even split of tech concerns versus actual features that we're trying to do. The next thing we do is that everybody in the team gets an even split of all of the stories. So like one of us might take 4, the other might take 3 stories. We go through them. We make sure there's detailed notes on how you yourself would actually implement this. If there's any questions, we ask Macdara there, we ask the designers there. There's a record of everything that we, as we're understanding how to do it, there's a complete record of that. Then the entire team meets in team grooming and we all discuss the stories, and often there's new ideas and better ways of doing things than the original person who looked at it. Standard sprint planning comes next. Obviously we figure out how long it's going to take to do these things. We have an end of sprint ceremony, which is basically if you've worked on something cool or interesting, or even if you've just read something interesting that's coming into React or Redux or any of the other technologies we're using, you present it to the rest of the team and we discuss it, and potentially it becomes a piece of tech work to go into the next sprint. But at least we also get that time to understand new stuff that's coming into the application, because when it becomes large, it's difficult to follow all of the changes that are coming in. And then I think the most important one of all is the retrospective, because each of these events exists directly because of a problem that we identified in our retros. So, for example, story readiness, that exists because we were starting on tech tasks and there was still unanswered questions in it. There was still acceptance criteria or edge cases that weren't covered. We'd have to kick it back to that process again. Dev grooming exists where we each go through them individually because our actual team planning meetings were taking so long. Having one person in the room who's an expert on that particular user story and how you're going to implement it cut our team grooming sessions down in half, I think, pretty much. And I'm not suggesting that each of these 5 or 6 events is what you should implement in your team. What I'm suggesting here is, if you have a problem coming up in your retro, create a process that you think will ease it. If it works after 1 or 2 sprints, keep doing it. It's the way you'll work out the right process for yourself.
Yeah, and like on that, there's a huge amount of discipline as well in the team, so it's credit to Nikola. But you might not have that in all of your companies, but definitely, and in all of our teams in OpenJaw wouldn't be quite as disciplined as this, but there is a really regimented process, and there's also a design process leading into that. So there's a lot of wheels moving in parallel, and it's all like synchronized to a great degree. So You know, there's a lot of sophistication there to get that kind of 6-8 week turnaround, where you get features out the other end. So it's not easy.
Yeah. Macdara picked this image. So skill diversity in your team. So when we were working with front end, there's one guy there, he's actually a designer developer. I can't remember which he was first. Clayton. Yeah. So we used to get him in for 4 hours every couple of weeks because we were coming across, like the example I said earlier, the hotel features. We had a big empty block there and we had to shoehorn them into each single room result. There was tricky little edge cases that we didn't account for in the design that we needed help with. We used to call this the Clayton Clinic. So he'd arrive in like some famous doctor, and everybody would have a list of problems like, please help me, this is going terribly wrong, how are we going to fix this?
Yeah, he's a very experienced guy, so and he works like an agency, so he's working 25 plus years in agency work, so he sees everything, all kinds of weird requirements, and he can, and it's nice having outside. It's one thing about having an agency, like it gives you a fresh perspective, so they're not kind of bought into the kind of internal view of the world, and they can challenge something. So it's kind of an interesting, I know it's mostly UX designers here, but don't be afraid of bringing in an agency to freshen up your thinking and to challenge existing kind of certainties.
Yeah. So obviously we needed Clayton. When he wasn't around, we were kind of scrambling on what to do and trying to make terrible developer-based design decisions. So we got a CV in one day from someone currently working as a designer who was interested in learning React and becoming a developer, and she's now a super integral part of our team. We basically have our own tiny mini Clayton on our team. So the rest of the team are helping her learn React, and she's helping us understand the design a lot better. She's able to make small modifications to things. So if you notice that you're constantly going outside your team for external expertise, consider embedding that person in your team or bringing someone in who has that expertise. Yeah,
and they are pretty rare, like unicorns. It's not easy to find someone who can do both engineering and UX design and sketch and all those different things, but they're invaluable to a team.
Yep. And then this might sound obvious, but this was a problem for us because we are building one application that sells hotels, flights, cars, and there's a product owner for each of those. So our team is kind of trying to, and you're the product owner of digital experience then as well, so too many cooks is probably the best
we definitely, this sounds obvious, but we definitely ran into this trouble where we had multiple product owners feeding into the team, and you can only have one product owner. I think that was the lesson we learned. Even though we had a kind of gap of domain knowledge gap, it just ended up in a lot of kind of disagreements and confusion with the team and not knowing what to do. So it's definitely, like I said, one chef in the kitchen is all you can have. That's the model. I mean, obviously, if you've got multiple teams, multiple product owners, it's fine, but one per team, obviously it makes sense. Like that's the whole nature of the role. But from our point of view, for engineering and design, there's so many conversations and decisions that have to be made, and the product owner has such a huge influence on the decisions.
So obviously, those were some of the problems we came up against and how we tried to get around them. But obviously, the biggest one when you get designers and developers in a room and product owners, multiple product owners, is handling problems, differences in opinion. So we got into one situation where there was just too many opinions, nobody could agree, and we'd wasted a week looking at these two very nice designs that Frontend had produced for for the flight summary. So
I might just give you a bit of background on this. So this is two alternate versions of the same screen, basically, on our responsive mobile view, but on the left obviously is a bit more cluttered, and the right is very clean and nice looking, which the UX design agency wanted us to use, and the left was more what our kind of product owner BAs wanted. So this became a political football, and potentially can become kind of toxic as well. Like people can fall out over the positioning of a tiny button, and not talk to each other. Like we've seen this.
Yeah.
So and then you can waste like 6-8 weeks arguing about whether this blue tag should be here or under here, and the whole team is blocked.
So we can't sit around waiting on our hands forever.
So Nikola took it into her own hands.
No. So Frontend kind of told us guerrilla test. you need to get data to back up your decision. So that's what we did. So when your experts can't agree, you need to go and defer to your users as your experts. So creators of an app or even designers become almost super users of that application with like bias that you don't even realize you have, code blindness because you've been looking at something for so long. And it's really important to defer to those users as experts in their own way because that's who you're producing this application for. And it gave us a clear path forward. We went with the more the bigger design on the left there with more information. And
because we're an enterprise, like we can't just deploy this out to SaaS and wait for the metrics to come in. It could take a year to go live with a customer. Like some of our customers are in China. We've got like 7 or 8 airlines live in China. So it could be, and it could be in Chinese. So the metrics you get back there are going to be useless anyway because it's very hard to test for something really subtle like this, and it's very subjective. And both versions might work equally well, really, in that sense. So it's just, like Nick said, the most efficient thing is just go down a bit of hallway testing, get a sense of it, and just make a decision and move on. And I suppose the big lesson for us was you can always come back and do it better the next time. It's not the final chance you get to do this blue tag thing or whatever. You know, you could do it again in a future version, but it really became we got locked into this one in a big way. So it's just a good lesson we learned.
Yeah, it is. And compromise is so important. You have to kind of go through a few rounds of engineering compromising and design compromising before you build that level of trust with each other. So I guess just to finish up, the main points I'm talking about here is leverage your design system as both a visual language, so you're both speaking the same language to each other, and a toolkit to work ahead on your functional prototypes. Iterate in low fidelity. It has a way lower cost. It's a lot quicker. Evolve your sprint process around your team, specifically the things that they're telling you are going wrong in your retros, because everyone's process is going to be slightly different. Diversify your skill set in your team if you notice that people are leaving or waiting around on other experts to come and give them advice on things. And don't spend a week arguing over really small design differences or opinions. Go to your users and get definitive answers on which one you should go with. And we're just now starting to see the benefits of this whole process. We've a way lower cost of change. We don't mind taking in brand new updates to components and rolling them out. It takes us 6 to 8 weeks from feature definition to release, which is a new record for us. I think we have a happier team and we have happier customers as well. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening to us and